Imagine a prosperous river flowing through the heart of Renton that Native Americans once called their home, which was the Black River. Here we will see the history of Renton prior to the lowering of the Lake Washington Ship Canal bridge and the present-day reconstruction, highlighting the challenges and changes going on in Renton now.
Two 2016 marks the 100-year anniversary of the completion of the Washington State Ship Canal Bridge project and the drying of the Black River in Renton. Today, the only way to see the river is to imagine it. The last original banks of the river lie dormant, forgotten by industry and years of progress to the side of Hardy Avenue behind Fred Meyer. Hundreds of people obliviously drive by without knowing what once lied here. The nature still exists, and I found it. Native Americans relied heavily on the Black River for its bountiful fishing, cool, clean water, and ubiquitous nature. They built their homes along its banks and used it for transportation. When the river dried in 1916, it all but ended the Native American presence in the region. Fortunately, there are still hints of their culture and their vivacity to this day in the city, and their spirit will always live on.
When walking through Renton, you can find its beauty spread throughout its walkways and waterways.
The Cedar is the other major river that was affected when Lake Washington dropped. Without the Black River to connect it to the lake, the Cedar consistently flooded downtown. This channel that runs underneath the historic Renton Library in the modern day was built to help mitigate that problem. The Cedar River and the trails surrounding it have undoubtedly helped to shape who I am. As a Kent Ridge High School student living in Renton, the Cedar was the closest thing to a paradise that we had. We would come here every weekend, consistently bringing firewood, friends, and a ton of good times. We'd go swimming like fish, hop on the trails, blaze new paths, and just generally have a great time. Unknowingly, this river was once connected to the historic Black. Knowing that today gives me a totally different perspective on the river, the region, and the native presence that I can still feel every single time I jump in the crystal clear water. The Renton Airport, just south of Lake Washington, is a modern-day reminder that progress is inevitable, and it cannot be stopped for a city that remains ahead of the curve. The Boeing plant at the south end of Lake Washington is one of the largest buildings in the world. My family has lived and worked here for generations. My grandfather worked there, and recently my dad retired after working for 42 years here. However, this plant didn't always exist. Before the lake was lowered, this entire area was a marshland, covered by 9 feet of water.
The first inhabitants in Renton envisioned a city that could connect the rest of the region to a prosperous coal trade. The railroad was a huge part of the distribution of coal in Renton and the Newcastle mines. And here is where Renton City Hall once was in 1908. And now, in 2016, we see the construction of a new brewery on the way.
Renton is a great example of a city that shows synchronicity between nature and industry. Although they are not as prevalent as they once were, tranquil scenes like this still exist for those who seek them. In the past, life here went at a turtle's pace. That was Renton. This is now. Some things never change.